Okay, so if you watched the last lesson, which was optional, it wasn't compulsory because I was just going through showing how the HTTPS configuration works with Apache and serving our site from HTTPS. And I finished that particular lesson by just adding my site URL into securityheaders.com to get the report about how we're doing with security. And we got an F. And an F is not a good grade, or not at the school I went to. So what we can also do is check our non-HTTPS site and we'll get the same result. And I'm just going to go to my published site on the non-secure URL that is just on the IP address. So I'm just going to copy this and just paste this one into the security headers and click scan. And we're going to get the same result, but what we also get inside here is a warning saying the site is using HTTP. And we'll ignore that for now and pretend that doesn't exist. But what we can do is take a look at all of the other headers that are missing from what we're sending back with our responses. And what we're aiming for is we want to turn this F into an A, of course. And these are the different headers that we need to add to our responses in order to get an A grade here. And if we take a look at what these different headers are for, then I'll just very quickly run through them. The biggest one is the content security policy. This one's used to prevent all sorts of mischief that can happen to our site. It prevents cross-site scripting, clickjacking, prevents mixed mode content, and it's a pretty powerful feature to add, which is going to prevent our browser from loading any other content apart from what's coming from our server. So if we don't allow anybody to add malicious JavaScript to our server, and we only allow content that's being sent back from our server, then this is a pretty good one to apply. And then we've got our other headers as well, and the cross-frame options tells the browser whether we want to allow our site to be framed or not, and this defends against attacks like clickjacking. We also have one to stop browsers from trying to mime sniff the content types, and we have a referrer policy one, and a feature policy one which is new, and we won't implement that one, but we will implement the other ones. And there's a bit of additional information in here, and we're advertising the server running on our server, so we can also remove that as well. So what we'll do is we'll go back to VS Code and start implementing these different security features. And what we'll do is we'll start off with the easy one, and we'll just go to program.cs. And what we want to do is turn off the server header, which notifies which server we're using for our application. And we can do that by adding a new option to our create default builder, and we'll say use Kestrel. And what we can do here is just turn off the header. So we'll say x.addServerHeader, and we'll just set this equal to false. And the other ones we're going to need to add a package to help us with, and we'll configure this all in our startup class as middleware. But what we'll need is a bit of help to do this, and what we can do is add a package. And what we want to add here is nwebsec, which is lowercase, and then ASP.NET Core and middleware. And press return. And this is the package that we want to add, and we want to add this to our API, and we'll just select the latest version and we'll add this to our API. And I'm missing the restore option, so what I'm going to do is just do a .NET restore and just make sure this package is installed and there's no problems, and that's fine. So what we'll do is we'll just add some middleware to add these security headers, and we need this to be above our default files and static files because we want our response headers to be added to the files that we're sending back. So let's start adding our security headers, and the first one we'll add is the X content type options, and this is the one that we use to prevent content sniffing. The next one we'll add is the app.useReferrer policy, and we'll give this some options, and we'll say opt.noReferrer. And this one just allows us to restrict the amount of information being passed on to other sites when referring to other sites. The next one we'll add is the app.useXSS protection, and this also takes some options. And we'll set this to enabled with block mode. And this one stops pages from loading when they detect reflected cross-site scripting attacks. And the next one we'll add is the useXFO, and we'll give this some options as well, and we'll say opt.deny. And this one is the header to block iframes, and this one prevents click-jacking attacks. And the last one we'll add is the content security policy. So we'll say use CSP, and we'll give this some options. And this one takes a whole bunch of different options actually. So what we want to do is we want to block all mixed content first of all. And this one prevents loading any assets using HTTP when the page is loaded using HTTPS. And then we want to specify the sources where we're going to allow content to be loaded from. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say style sources, and we'll set this equal to s.self. And what we'll also do is set the font sources, and we'll set this equal to s.self. The form actions we'll set to, again, not surprisingly, self again. The frame ancestors we'll set to s.self. The image sources we'll set to s goes to s.self. And the script sources, again, we'll use s goes to s.self. And this one is certainly going to break our application in several places. So when we're saying our style sources can only be served by the server itself, if we take a look at our index.html file, then what we're using in here is a content delivery network for our semantic UI CSS. And this is an easy correction, but what we'll do first of all, before we actually use this properly, we can also use this to get a report. And our application will still load, but this will give us a report of what we need to do to correct this. So what we'll do is we'll say use CSP, and we'll use report only. And this will give us a bunch of different instructions about what we need to do next. So let's implement all of these, and I'm missing a semicolon. And this is going to return a whole bunch of headers now with our responses. So we're just going to run this locally for now. We don't want to publish our application to the Linux server, find we're missing something, then come back and make a change, then republish, etc., etc. So what we'll do is we'll just run this locally. And we'll say .NET run, and I'll just give it P for API, because I'm at the solution level, and just press return. And once this has started, we can go take a look at our application. So I'll just come over to the application running on localhost 5000. I'll just refresh the page. We can see our application still working. But if I go and inspect the content and look at the whopping great big number of errors we've got going on here, and this is all coming from content security policy. And there's a few interesting things going on here. First of all, it tells us that we fail on the style sheet. We already knew we were going to fail on that. And it's telling us that it can't load this from this particular location. So we can see what this is doing for us. It prevents us loading content that we haven't specifically whitelisted. We haven't told it that this is okay to load content from. And we get the same thing for the fonts as the style sheet as well. And interestingly, we also get a report on refusing to execute an inline script because it violates the following. And we've got script source set to self. And if we take a look at the elements that make up our page, and if we take a look at the head, we can see obviously we're failing on this one. And if we look at the body tag as well, and take a look at our scripts, these scripts are fine because they're being loaded with a source. But we've also got an inline script here as well. And this is coming from Webpack. And this is also something we'll need to take care of. But if we go back to the console and take a look at that one specifically related to the inline script, what we can use is a hash of that specific content to say that it's okay to load up that specific inline script content. So what we'll take a look at next is we'll take a look at cleaning all of this up so that we get a clean report and we're whitelisting all of the content that we want to allow our server to serve. And we'll start to take a look at that next.